Thanks, Corla. Why are we here again at the start of another Dáil term, debating something that the Dáil debated previously, that the Dáil passed, our bill? Why are we here again? Because the government is deliberately blocking it, is leaving it in committee, or not even progressing it in reality to committee, because the government is opposed to the reintroduction of the eviction ban, despite the fact that the Dáil actually passed this bill to have a proper eviction ban to prevent people from being made homeless. And at the root of that is the conscious decision of the government to allow the numbers of homeless people in this state to rise higher and higher and higher so that landlords can maximise their profit. That's the essence of the decision that the government has made, and that it looks like the government is shamefully going to continue to make as we go into the winter. We know there's now almost 13,000 people homeless in emergency accommodation, 4,000 of those being children. They're the ones in emergency accommodation. In addition to that, you have to add those who are sleeping rough on our streets while the storm is approaching. You add those who are couch surfing. You add those who are living in vans, in cars, in tents in our parks. All of those people. And it is an absolute disgrace, and it's a conscious political choice. The Taoiseach yesterday, in response to Richard Boyd Barrett, argued that the last eviction ban did not work. Homelessness increased, and the number of people in emergency accommodation increased for almost every month that it was in situ. It just deferred homelessness and made a bad situation worse later. Deferring homelessness. I mean, even what he's saying is complete nonsense. But the idea that deferring homelessness would be a bad thing, that it doesn't matter to people that they have a roof over their heads tonight or tomorrow night or next month or whatever, is utterly bizarre. The idea that it made a bad situation worse is ridiculous. Yes, it's true that in the time frame of the last inadequate eviction ban, it's not the same as the eviction ban we have. It didn't bring down the numbers of people who are homeless, and the number of people, in emergency accommodation rose throughout most of those months. But it's disingenuous in the extreme by the Taoiseach, because he knows that the figures demonstrate that once the eviction ban, that the partial, inadequate eviction ban was lifted, then the homeless figures begin to rise at a much, much more rapid rate. So it made a difference. It reduced the number of people who were in emergency accommodation who were homeless, and now the government has made the decision, and is going to stick to it by the looks of it, to allow more and more people to become homeless. They seem to think that the political price of having 15,000, 16,000 people homeless is a price worth paying, as long as it means that the market can continue to operate. There's 5,700 eviction notices issued in the second quarter of this year, about 1,000 more than were issued in the first 3 months when the partial eviction ban was in place. In the 3 months since the end of the partial eviction ban, half of the single adults who became homeless said they'd been evicted from rental accommodation. All those people would have been spared homelessness if the government had put it in place. Thousands more will be spared homelessness if the government would accept this and actually implement the eviction ban. We've had 20,000 notices to quit issued this year before the start of July. And what's the government's alternative to an eviction ban? The government's alternative to an eviction ban is tax breaks for landlords. That's the government's alternative. The government's alternative is to say that landlords should pay a lower rate of tax on passive income than their renters pay on earned income that they get for going out to work. It is scandalous, shame-faced, barefaced stuff. I mean, you construct a logic for it, and I'll demonstrate how there's no basis for it, but again, people can see the reason you're doing it is because this is a government that represents the landlords. It's not a government that represents renters. It's not a government that represents homeless people. So the constructed argument by the landlord lobby is to say landlords are fleeing the sector, we're having such a difficult time and so on, we need to have tax breaks, we need to pay a lower rate of tax, and that will give stability to tenants. The truth is that there are record rents being paid in this country now. There's a record amount of money going from the pockets of ordinary people into the pockets of those who own multiple properties, in particular, of course, the big corporate landlords. There was 3.1 billion paid in rent in 2016. There was 4.7 billion paid in rent to private landlords in 2022. Average weekly rent went from €200 to €273. And as Richard has pointed out, rather than this idea that the private rented sector is getting smaller, it's gotten bigger. From 2016 to 2022, the number of occupied dwellings rented from a private landlord increased by 7% to over 330,000. So this is just a manufactured argument to try to get some tax cuts and to pay even less tax than renters are asked to pay. The alternative is extremely simple. The alternative is that if landlords want to exit the market, grand. No problem. That's not a crisis for anybody as long as the tenant gets to remain in situ. So, landlord wants to exit the market, the state should just buy the property off them at market rate. The landlord achieves what they want, which is they say they want to exit the market, fine. The tenant gets security of tenure, gets to become a council tenant. The state gets the benefit of an asset. It stops someone becoming homeless, and now it has an asset that it will get rent from and will... That is tenant in situ, that's right.
Which we proposed.
We proposed, and that should be done everywhere. So instead of saying that we have to give these people tax breaks to stay in the market, we just say, if you want to leave, no problem, the state will buy, and we expand our public housing. It needs to be expanded right across the country. I want to raise also the cases of illegal eviction which are taking place in this country, and where the Gardaí are doing precisely what was depicted in Spice Bag's art, which was so much condemnation of the Gardaí standing by while families were being evicted. Look what happened in Waterford about a month ago. Aaron Madigan and his fiancée Grace got a notice of termination. They contacted CATU, they contacted Threshold. They were able to find out their actual rights as tenants, regardless of the disingenuous and wrong contract supposing that they were licensees. And they were able to say, they disputed with the RTB, and they were able to say that they hadn't, this is an illegal eviction. There wasn't a correct notice period served, no correct eviction, and so on. Men showed up to evict them, kicked down their door. They were illegally trying to break into their home. They called the Gardaí. That's what you're recommended to do. And the Gardaí arrived and brought the men into their home and helped facilitate the eviction. It's an absolute scandal that Gardaí are being used to facilitate illegal evictions in the state. There was no statement by Drew Harris about that. There was no action to prevent that illegal eviction. And it shows whose side this state is on, and it's certainly not on the side of renters.